Most people think trillion-dollar companies are built by armies of engineers, global networks, and decades of slow progress. They're wrong. Sometimes, it starts with one person, one obsession, and one question that no one else dared to ask. How much control can one idea really have over the world? This isn't just the story of a company. It's the story of how one man, driven by vision and defiance, reshaped technology, business, and human behavior itself. By the end, you'll see why his success wasn't luck, but inevitability, and why every empire built on innovation carries the seeds of its own collapse. In the late 1970s, the world was still analog. Computers were machines for governments, not people. They filled rooms, cost fortunes, and spoke a language only scientists could understand. But one man saw something different. He believed computers could become personal, intimate, emotional even. That man was Steve Jobs. Born in 1955, adopted, and raised in a modest California home, Jobs wasn't a conventional prodigy. He was restless, obsessive, and impossible to manage. He dropped out of college, studied calligraphy for no practical reason, and spent time meditating in India searching for clarity. But when he met a shy electronics genius named Steve Wozniak, everything clicked. In 1976, they built their first computer in a garage. It wasn't powerful, but it was beautiful. And beauty mattered to Jobs more than logic. He believed that design wasn't just about looks, but about meaning. He called their company Apple, and that name, simple and human, was the first hint of his genius. While others spoke the language of machines, Apple spoke the language of people. Jobs didn't just want to sell computers. He wanted to sell a new way of thinking. The Apple II became a success, turning a small startup into a cultural phenomenon. By the early 1980s, Apple was a rising star. But fame only fueled Jobs' ambition. He wanted perfection, and perfection has a price. When the Macintosh was released in 1984, it was revolutionary. It had icons, a mouse, and a voice that said, "Hello." It felt alive. But inside Apple, chaos ruled. Jobs' perfectionism clashed with management. He demanded the impossible, and when people couldn't deliver, he broke them. In 1985, Apple's board had enough. They forced Jobs out of the company he had created. At 30 years old, the man who dreamed of changing the world was suddenly unemployed. For most, that would have been the end. For Jobs, it was just the beginning. When you lose everything, you discover what really matters. Jobs had money, but no direction. He founded a new company, Next, to build the perfect computer, one that would change education and design forever. But perfection doesn't sell. Next was admired, not bought. Its machines were too expensive, too advanced, too early. The company failed commercially, but its ideas were decades ahead of their time. At the same time, Jobs made a different kind of investment, one that seemed random. He bought a small computer graphics division from George Lucas for $10 million. It had brilliant engineers but no clear purpose. Jobs renamed it Pixar. For years, Pixar struggled. They made short films, developed animation software, and tried to survive. Jobs poured his money and faith into it, even when everyone told him to quit. But in 1995, Pixar released Toy Story, the world's first fully computer-animated movie. It was a masterpiece. The film earned over $350 million, and suddenly Jobs was a billionaire again. Pixar changed cinema forever. It proved that technology could feel human, that art and code could coexist. It was everything Jobs believed in: simplicity, emotion, and innovation fused together. But his story with Apple wasn't over. In 1997, Apple was collapsing. The company he had created was now months from bankruptcy. And in a twist worthy of legend, Apple bought NXT, the company Jobs had built in exile to save itself. The prodigal founder returned home. This time, not as a dreamer, but as a visionary reborn. When Jobs walked back into Apple, it was chaos. Too many products, too little direction, and no soul. He began cutting everything that didn't matter. Desktops, printers, side projects gone. He told his team to focus on one thing: excellence. And from that focus came a miracle. In 1998, Apple released the iMac, a computer that looked nothing like its competitors. It was round, colorful, transparent, and fun. It made technology feel alive again. It sold millions. Apple was reborn. But Jobs was just getting started. He didn't want Apple to make products. He wanted it to make culture. He once said, "The people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do." And he meant it. His next goal wasn't just to make computers smaller, but to make them personal, truly personal. He dreamed of a device that would fit in your pocket, hold your music, your photos, your life. The result was the iPod. Launched in 2001, it transformed how people listened to music. Suddenly, entire libraries fit in your hand. Apple wasn't a computer company anymore. It was becoming something bigger, a brand that defined modern identity. But Jobs was still chasing the impossible. He wanted one device to rule them all. Something that would combine the phone, the internet, and the iPod into a single, elegant object. In 2007, he walked onto a stage in San Francisco and said 9 words that changed history. Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone. The audience laughed at first. Then, they saw it. The iPhone. A device so simple it seemed inevitable, yet so revolutionary it redefined everything. Communication, photography, entertainment, even behavior. Jobs didn't just create a product. He created a platform for a new world. When the iPhone launched, the world didn't just get a new gadget, it got a new reality. A rectangle of glass and metal that fit in your hand but held your entire life inside. Within months, Apple wasn't just selling phones, it was selling identity. And Steve Jobs had built not a company, but a cult of simplicity, control, and desire. Every commercial, every keynote, every product carried his fingerprints: minimalist, confident, almost spiritual. He wasn't selling features, he was selling belonging. Apple stores became temples. White light, clean design, quiet music, and products displayed like sacred objects. People didn't buy an iPhone, they joined something. And that was the true genius of Steve Jobs. He turned technology into emotion. But behind the glass and applause, the pressure was immense. Jobs demanded perfection at every level. No screw, no pixel, no curve could be wrong. He could explode over a shade of gray or the click of a button. To him, Apple wasn't a business. It was a reflection of himself. And like all visionaries, he couldn't separate creation from control. He once said, "Design is not just what it looks like and feels like. Design is how it works." That philosophy became Apple's DNA: precision, beauty, discipline. It created harmony, but also fear. Inside Apple, failure wasn't an option. And yet, that obsession paid off. The iPhone became the fastest-selling product in history. By 2010, Apple had more cash than the US Treasury. And one man, standing in his black turtleneck and jeans, had reshaped the global economy. Jobs didn't just create devices. He created an ecosystem, a seamless loop that locked users inside Apple's world. Every product was designed to connect perfectly with the next. Mac, iPod, iPhone, iPad. You could enter easily, but leaving was almost impossible. This was brilliance disguised as convenience. The tighter the system, the more valuable it became. Every song, app, and photo you owned tied you closer to Apple. Jobs had reinvented capitalism as a walled garden, beautiful, simple, and closed. Competitors laughed at first. They're not laughing now. When the App Store launched in 2008, it changed business forever. Suddenly, Apple wasn't just selling hardware, it was taking a percentage of every digital transaction on the planet. Games, music, software, services, all flowing through Apple's gate. The iPhone became the center of a new economy, an empire built not on steel or oil, but on attention. Every ping, swipe, and scroll meant profit. Apple had turned human behavior itself into a product. And while other companies chased innovation, Jobs chased experience. He wanted Apple devices to feel like extensions of the soul, not tools, but companions. When he talked about making a dent in the universe, he meant it literally. But perfection always comes with a cost. By 2011, Jobs was battling cancer. His body weakened, but his focus never faded. He micromanaged even from the hospital bed, obsessing over packaging, glass edges, and future designs. To those around him, it seemed cruel. To him, it was purpose. Jobs once said, "We're here to put a dent in the universe. Otherwise, why even be here?" And even as his health deteriorated, he was designing the future. The iPad had just launched, creating a new category no one knew they needed. Apple had become a cultural phenomenon, a financial superpower, and a global addiction. But the man behind it was disappearing. In his final months, Jobs rarely appeared in public. He spent his time refining Apple's next headquarters, a circular glass building he called the spaceship, a perfect loop, just like his philosophy. On October 5, 2011, Steve Jobs died at the age of 56. The world mourned as if it had lost an artist, not a CEO, because in many ways, it had. His death marked the end of an era, but not the end of his influence. He had left behind more than a company. He had left behind a blueprint for how power, design, and emotion could merge into a trillion-dollar empire. And that empire was just beginning to rise. When Steve Jobs died, many believed Apple would fade without him. How could a company built on one man's vision survive without the man himself? But something strange happened. Instead of collapsing, Apple grew. And within 7 years, it became the first company in history worth $1 trillion. The world celebrated it as a triumph. But beneath the headlines was a question Jobs himself would have asked had Apple fulfilled his dream or betrayed it. Under Tim Cook, Apple became smoother, safer, and more predictable. The chaos of genius was replaced by the precision of management. Products became refinements, not revolutions. Margins grew, supply chains expanded, and Apple turned from a movement into a machine. The company that once fought giants had become the giant. Apple no longer just made devices, it ruled an entire ecosystem of money, data, and design. Its cash reserves surpassed the GDP of small nations. Its factories, though outsourced, employed millions indirectly, and its logo, a bitten apple, became a global symbol of aspiration. Jobs had wanted Apple to merge technology with humanity. And in a way, he succeeded perhaps too well, because now, humanity had merged with technology.